Alright, so let's talk about the Simple Dishonesty Perception Metric, or DHP metric. So the DHP metric is designed to catalog and calculate all the instances of dishonesty, or all the instances that have a lack of clairvoyance in the video game industry. And then it ranks companies based on whatever score they're given. Our team kind of identified five pretty archetypal instances of dishonesty, or types of dishonesty that occur in the video game industry. And so each archetypal practice was given a score: -1, -2, -3, -4, and -5, depending upon the severity of the archetypal practice. So the first is -1. That is rumor denial. So it's just if a journalist asks someone who's working at a company, "Are you working on XYZ?" and the employee says, "No, we're not," even though they actually are, and it turns out that yeah, they actually were working on that thing when they denied working on that thing, then they get a -1 to their DHP score. -2 is spin doctoring, my personal favorite. Like the EA pride and accomplishment thing, that's spin doctoring. That they're taking a situation that is clearly bad, clearly wrong, clearly some not great things are happening, and they say, well, the reason we did what we did because we want to give people a sense of pride and accomplishment. And it's like, no, you don't. No, stop lying. Get out of here. That is a well-earned -2 to their DHP score because of that little spin doctoring that they have. -3 is a broken promise. This is the one where, I don't really want to include it, and the only reason I did include it was because it was the only way I could have Nintendo on the board and in the rankings. Because otherwise, Nintendo is apparently a pretty honest company, which I wasn't really expecting, just because I thought, okay, they're this massive corporation, they make so many projects, they've got to be on the list, and they kind of aren't. But anyway, so the -3 rank is for a broken promise. So if a company says, we're going to release X game in 3 years or whatever, and then they end up just canceling the game or whatever, then they get a -3 to their DHP score because that is a broken promise. That's one that I personally don't particularly like, just because I don't know if that'll be a good thing to hold companies accountable to those broken promises, because sometimes it is just a wise decision to just let some projects go as opposed to persisting with them. And projects are let go and canceled all the time. So personally, I don't really like that one. But again, the only reason I included it was because I know people would throw a tantrum or a fit or a conniption, what have you, if I had Microsoft on the board, if I had Sony on the board, but if I didn't have Nintendo on the board. And the only way I could have Nintendo on the board is if I hold people accountable for these broken promises. So anyway, so that's the -3 one. Then the -4 is really the big one. That is the inaccurate portrayal. False advertising in some cases, or fraud, or however you put it. Technically, if it's illegal, then that makes it a -5. But anyway, so -4 is just an inaccurate portrayal. So sort of like the watchdog situation. What the company displayed, or what they put on display in promotion, was very different from the final product. Very, very different from the final product, obviously. So, that's an inaccurate portrayal. Or if a company says, we're going to have this feature in our game, and the game comes out and that feature is not present, that is also a -4 inaccurate portrayal. -5 is just any kind of illegal activity in relation to video games. So if a CEO commits insider trading or something like that, or what else happened? Oh, if they don't pay employees, or if they're sued for fraud and the lawsuit is successful, then that gives them a -5 to their dishonesty perception score. So after we catalog and calculate all of the instances of dishonesty for a particular company, then we sum all of those instances, and then we give the company its total DHP score, right? So Scoundrel Incorporated, they had 3 instances of inaccurate portrayals. That's -4, -4, -4. We sum all of those instances, and that gives us a total of -12. So Scoundrel Incorporated, their DHP score is -12. And then they're ranked alongside their other companies based on, do they have a higher score or a lower score based on that amount. So I should also say that the current Simple Dishonesty Perception Metric is that it's very much a prototype, or a prototype. it isn't really where I want it to be. We don't really know how honest or how dishonest these companies are. All we're really evaluating is just, well, how do people feel about these companies? Do they feel like Ubisoft is honest or dishonest? Because that's kind of what we're looking at. That's what we're evaluating. If people don't complain about an act of dishonesty, like if Nintendo does something that really is just dishonest, if people don't complain about it, we aren't going to know about it. And so that's kind of one of the flaws or one of the benefits in the DHP system is that, yeah, it's dishonesty perception. It's, well, how do people feel, as opposed to what is the actual reality. So that could be that could be good, that could be bad. Quantifying people's sentiment. That's interesting, right? So really, it's just frequency is more important to the DHP metric than severity. So it's like, 5 instances of rumor denial equates to 1 instance of illegal activity. So if a CEO were to murder his employees or something, well, that gives him a -5. But if he were to deny that he was working on Pikmin 4 5 times, then that would equate to the instance of murder. So that's just to give you an example of how frequency is more important than severity in the DHP metric, and that's kind of why I personally don't enjoy it. I don't quite like it that much. It actually does not portray what I personally think are the worst instances of dishonesty in the video game industry, and how I would personally rank companies. But that's also kind of why it's fascinating too, is that these metrics, whenever we do them, they always surprise me. Whoever wins or whoever loses, I'm always surprised by the result. I thought, the biggest companies, I really thought that the biggest companies, that they were going to be at the very top just because of how big they are, just how they're doing stuff all the time, so they're saying a lot more stuff, and so just because of that, they're inevitably they're going to make mistakes, and they're just going to end up, lying more often than everybody else. And so the metric is deontological and not utilitarian. So it kind of assumes that dishonesty is always bad, regardless of the consequence. And the reason we do that is not for any kind of philosophical reason. It's just because it makes the metric a lot easier if we don't also have to take into account what are the end consequences and who benefits, and we don't really have to do cost-benefit analysis or anything like that. Utilitarianism is far more difficult to calculate, as opposed to deontologicalism. Deontology, oh my god, this is too much. If we just say that lying is bad no matter what, then that makes it very easy to calculate. And right now, because it's the simple dishonesty perception metric, that's kind of the way I would prefer to do it right now. Later down the line, I would much rather use utilitarianism, I think, in most circumstances, or at least in some. There are some exceptions that I personally made, just because I'm we can't. This is an instance where they just did what they had to do, but I don't. But that's beside the point. The point is that for the most part, it's deontological, and we just assume that lying is bad no matter what. That's the way it is right now. It's probably going to change in the future. The metric also, it only concerns itself with things that take place in the video game industry itself. Like Sony, they make televisions and stuff like that. If they inaccurately portray a television, they aren't actually going to be held accountable for that, because it doesn't concern itself with the video game industry. If they were to inaccurately portray a PlayStation Next or PlayStation 5 or whatever the next console thing is going to be, then they will be held accountable for that in the DHP metric. But not if they inaccurately portray a TV or something like that, or something that is outside the industry. Or if a CEO, if he commits insider trading regarding his company in the video game industry, then he's going to be held accountable for that. If he does something with a prostitute or something like that, he actually isn't going to be held accountable for that, because that just doesn't really have anything to do with the video game industry. If it was if he were having an affair with Princess Peach or something, then okay, we might take that into account, but that'd be the only exception. And later down the line, we're going to include a factor for reconciliation or reparation or something like that. So basically, if a company, they tell a lie, and then later they go down the line and they try to fix the harm that they had done, right now there is no system in place to take that into account. Because again, we haven't done the research, we haven't touched this in a long time, actually. So that's kind of on our to-do list. So basically, if a company does something that gives them a -4, and then later down the line they do something that should hypothetically like reduce the severity of what they've done, right now there's nothing in the metric to really account for that, even though there probably should be. Would that be utilitarianism? I don't know. Anyway. Oh yeah. So just like going again on like the severity thing. If a company says that, well, this game has this feature, and then it turns out not to have that feature, then that's a -4, right? That's an inaccurate portrayal. Even if it's just like, well, we said that you were going to be able to change shoes in the game or something like that, and then it turns out that you can't change shoes or something. I don't know. Seems kind of petty, right? Well, the metric doesn't really care. If people complain about it, then it gets a -4. It doesn't matter that it's something that's kind of petty. If some people somewhere think that it's important, then it's going to get the -4. Whereas over here, if it's something really big, like a company said, this game is going to, it's going to look like this, like the Watch Dogs thing, because they exaggerated graphical quality, it gets a -4. Now, one of these is probably more important than the other. But that sort of doesn't matter. It's both instances are going to get the same -4 value, regardless of the severity. The metric it doesn't really concern itself with what might or might not be important, and it doesn't really distinguish between what is or isn't severe. It's going to give things the same result regardless, just out of simplicity, because it is the simple dishonesty perception metric and not the advanced one that doesn't exist yet. I don't know. So anyway, so that's really the DHP metric, at least the simple version that exists right now. I'm tired. I think that qualifies well enough. I don't know. It's interesting. I like it. Still simple, but it's something that does something anyway. Okay. Goodbye.